Hi, everyone. Welcome. Okay, thank you so much for joining. Super excited to have you all here. We're going to ask that you stay on mute, but feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and just hang out for a minute. We'll get started in just a second. Welcome to everyone that just joined. We're going to get started in just a minute. Please stay on mute, but feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. I think, so this is a question in the chat, I think we have some backgrounds for everyone to download. If you join the Austin Design Week Slack group, you might find them there. Awesome. We had a couple more people join. Thanks so much for joining. So we're going to ask you to stay on mute, but feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. We'll get started in just a minute. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started here. Welcome to Austin Design Week 2020. We're so glad that you are all here. My name is Maddie Huey, and I am on the ADW team this year. As you can see on the slide, you can connect with us and share your experiences over the week by tagging us on social media. Go to the next slide. And if you haven't already, we encourage you to join the ADW Slack workspace. Please check the Zoom chat where we'll be putting the link and several other resources for you. And we encourage you to continue the conversation there. There are also free events all week, so we encourage you to check out the schedule and join us for more. And then lastly, We want to say a huge thanks to our generous sponsors for making this year happen. At the end of the event, you'll be asked to take a brief survey on this event, and we'd love to hear from you. And now I'm going to pass it over to Rachel to get it started.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. And welcome to the Favors presentation that we've called Turning on a Dime, Pivoting Your Business to Empower Communities During Times of Crisis, which is something I'm sure all of us have had to do this year. And we're excited to walk you through some of the design and company challenges that we kind of recognized and approached this year in service of our customers and our communities. So if we go to the next slide, you can see who are we? I'm Rachel. I'm the head of product at Favor. Cooper and Meg are both on the product team. Cooper is our principal product designer, and Meg is our senior manager of product design and research. Also joining us is Rachel Burnside, a member of the Favor team who's not in product, but whose voice we really wanted included in our presentation today. She's our head of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because we're going to be talking today not only about the way that Favor had to adjust our product and in the face of COVID, but also ways that we adjusted our product and adjusted as a company in response to the Black Lives Movement and in support of the Black Lives Matter movement. And so Rachel is going to be here to talk about that today. What is Favor? Favor is Texas' best delivery service. You can see our tagline is, if it's a Texas favorite, you can favor it. But overall, Favor is the best way to get restaurant prepared food delivered to your door in under an hour. And we also will deliver a lot of other things besides restaurant prepared food. We now deliver groceries, we deliver essentials, we deliver personal assistance. Favor is an extremely flexible personal assistance platform. And if you go to the next slide, I want to give you a quick overview of how Favor works before we get into this. So on the left, you'll see what probably you think of as Favor, which is Favor's delivery app. This is the app that you have downloaded on your phone. This is our consumer app, where as a customer, you can browse different merchants, you can browse different categories, you can write what you want. If it's sort of a custom favor, you can place your favor, track it, and get it delivered to you. But there's so much more going on behind the scenes that you may not realize as a consumer using Favor. On the right, you'll see our Favor Runner app. And this is where our vast network of runners actually receive your favor, get all the information they need about how to successfully fulfill it, and go through the steps of fulfilling a favor and delivering it to you. And at Favor, we put just as much effort, just as many resources, just as much research, and just as much design and operational effort into the runner experience as we do the consumer experience, because runners really are the lifeblood of our product, and without them, we don't have a product. What you can see that kind of connects these two experiences is Favor's backend, where we have an assignment algorithm that matches a favor to the most suitable runner. We transmit information about the order to the runner. We have an ETA algorithm that calculates and estimates how soon your favor should arrive based on a number of factors. We power communication between the customer and the runner so that they can talk with each other, and they can each talk with our support team if they need to. We provide navigation help to the runner so that they can get to the restaurant and they can get to you. And we also have a payment and tipping service that allows us, the customer, to pay, the runner to get paid, and the runner to understand and forecast how much they're going to make. So there's a whole kind of complex ecosystem underneath everything that we're doing and that you see on the consumer side that allows these favors to be fulfilled. And that influences the problems that we have to solve and the design choices that we have to make. And if we go to the next slide, I'm going to pass it over to Meg, who's going to talk through what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, so thanks again, everyone, for joining us. We're really excited to talk about some of the work we did. I think for so many people, including probably all of you on this call, it's been an unprecedented year. So we're going to show you some of the ways that we here at Favor tried to meet the moment, and we'll share some key findings and a loose framework about our approach to kind of all of the projects that we'll touch on today. And then, we hope to leave a good amount of time at the end for some questions. So along the way, if there's something that you're really interested in diving deeper into, we're going to kind of give you a surface level view of all of these projects, but we'd love to know anything that you want us to kind of dive deeper into. So feel free in the chat to post any sort of questions, and towards the end, we'll save a good amount of time to field those questions. And we did want to call out that the work that we're showing today, we're going to show you a lot of product work that is kind of our team, but it was powered by so many people who aren't on this call today. So it's not just our story that we're telling. We're telling the story of like our marketing and brand teams and our sales teams and our operations teams, and of course our product and engineering team. But really, this was work that was fueled by all of Favor, and so we did want to call that out before we got into this. And I'm going to kick it over to Rachel Burnside to talk about what 2020 has meant for us at Favor.
Thanks, Meg. If you want to go to the next slide. So when we all got hit by COVID, we watched the world change. And so what you'll see on this slide are just some of the headlines that we were able to capture. And it kind of shows the effect that COVID had on all of us personally, as well as professionally. And as an on-demand delivery company, we quickly felt the impact and the responsibility that we have on and for our community. So while COVID, presented challenges for everyone, what it also did was it highlighted disparities between communities. We know that the coronavirus has had different implications on seniors and even Black and Brown and other underdeveloped communities as well. And so these challenges required us to be accountable as a business and as a people. And so the next pandemic that we were hit with, unfortunately, was racism. And so many of us, we started calling the fight for justice post George Floyd, the Black Lives Matter movement. Myself and our CEO, Jag Bath, we had a couple of Zoom calls with the founder of Black Lives Matter, Patrisse Cullors, and she shared with us that, the organization, when it started, they had no idea that it would turn into what it did turn into. And you have to remember that the BLM movement was founded in 2013 in response to the Trayvon Martin case. So if you consider for a moment that that was 7 years ago when that was started, and how long we've been fighting for these injustices within the Black community, I think it leads to the question of like, why is now different? And in my opinion, the difference has been shown mostly in response. It's been shown in the response through social media, through marketing, through products like our Favor app, and the fact that because of COVID, we were all at home and we were required to look. We haven't had anything to do but look at the news, but really pay attention to what's happening around us. We can go to the next slide. And so we realized that we definitely have a responsibility to use our influence. And we know Texas. We are Texas. And so because of that, we knew that we could use our influence and our platform to support in this situation of COVID, in this situation of racial injustice. We knew that we see that delivery is essential, that at a time when people can't leave the house, we were able to really bring people the things that they needed and wanted and desired, so that they could be safe and we could all be safe. And we, run on keeping Texas running. And so in a time where people were laid off and restaurants were really struggling to keep their doors open, we were able to still send business and still assist our community with, making ends meet. And then again, we are part of the HEB family, and being in Texas, I am not from Texas, and I didn't know how big HEB was in the community until I moved here. And I realized it really is the cornerstone of the community. And so we wanted to make sure that we, just like HEB, remember that, and that we step up in the same way that they often do.
And so, something, piggybacking on everything that Rachel said, like we were looking at everything that was going on, and we were looking at the opportunities that this presented for us, which is really, how are we going to use our platform to support our communities? Favor Favor really, and this ties back to what Rachel said in the beginning, it's more than an app, it's a service that's powered by people who are experiencing the world and experiencing these changes as they're happening. So they're using the product in their real lives to solve problems. And so we were asking ourselves, how do we meet these moments that are happening, and design solutions that are going to help support our Texas communities, because we did feel that huge responsibility to pivot what we're doing into supporting our communities. And so I'll sort of walk you through a general framework of what our broad approach was here. The first thing that we were really doing is asking ourselves, like, what is happening, what users are most likely to experience in these moments. So trying to anticipate these changes as and before they were happening. And we'll talk a little bit about kind of our takeaways there, and what we did to make sure that we had the resources and the platforms to listen in place. The second thing, and this is, something that we as designers think a lot about, but was, what constraints do we have, and how can we use these constraints to be more creative and build things that are really great for our users in this moment when we have to work very quickly. So we'll sort of talk about that a little bit more. The third thing is deciding how we can use patterns and break patterns in these moments. And so we'll walk you through a couple of examples of how we did that and how we made those decisions. The fourth thing that we'll talk about is just like, when you're grinding, you have to carve out space to recharge. So we'll talk a little bit about the things that we did there. And then lastly, we'll talk you through how we're using everything that we've learned during this experience and rolling it back into our core offerings at Favor, which we think is kind of like the essential part of this, like taking what we've learned and moving forward. So broadly, we'll sort of talk about a huge number of things that we did. I wanted to call out a couple of them here, and we can talk about these in any more depth that you'd like as well. But we created a senior program from scratch to support Texas seniors. We pivoted to doing doorstep deliveries of both alcohol and food items to make sure that our communities were supported in a way that was safe for them during COVID. And then we did a bunch of relief programs and gathered funds, not only for restaurant relief, but also in-app giving for the Black Lives Matter movement, which Rachel will touch more on later. So now I'm going to kind of kick it over to Cooper, who will talk about the first part of this, which is like how we anticipated the way things were changing.
Yeah, so when COVID happened, a lot of the ways that people were thinking and acting really just changed overnight. And so the first thing that we tried to do as a team was really anticipate the ways that we would need to change some of our products and services so that we could best serve our users going forward. And we knew that this meant we need to listen, really keep on top of what was happening, and just try to adapt to the new COVID landscape. And also we had to make changes really, really fast. COVID kind of hit us out of the blue. And it was extremely important to us that we put things in place quickly that would enable us to serve our communities going forward. So we tried to anticipate and identify some of the biggest user problems. And these are a few of the big ones that we had to solve for. So the first one here was really recognizing that a lot of people were having trouble getting access to essential grocery items. And grocery delivery services became super important. And we wanted to help people get the essential grocery items that they needed. And we'll talk a little bit more about what we did for grocery specifically in just a bit. The second thing here is that we recognized that there were more vulnerable groups of people who were unable to shop. Namely, this was senior citizens. And so we decided to do some work to really help our senior citizens get access to our delivery services and also place grocery orders online. And then the last thing here, prior to COVID, physical interaction was a pretty key part of our delivery service. So runners would interact directly with merchants when they would go to pick up items. And they would also interact directly with customers at the point that they would drop off the items. So with COVID, we basically had to make this huge shift from having these physical interactions as part of our service to being a fully contactless delivery service. So this first thing here, this is an initiative that we called doorstep delivery, and this was basically the first thing that we did right out of the gate with COVID, and this was our effort to basically move to a 100% contactless delivery service. Most of this effort was basically just creating really clear messaging for both our customers and our runners. And so for customers, you can see here, these are some screens showing what customers and runners would see. So on the left, for customers, they basically saw messaging that was carried throughout the entire app experience from the point that they get into the app to the point that they check out. And it was just really just telling them that their deliveries were going to be contactless and that they would be left at their doorsteps. And then similarly for runners also had some messaging that would tell them to leave all of the deliveries at the customer's doorstep. And we also added a new step to the progression of these favors for runners. So a runner would basically have to explicitly tell us that they left the delivery at the customer's door. Yep. So this is showing some of the stuff that we did for grocery, and this is something that we called express delivery. Like I said before, grocery was very, very important. And it was also a relatively new thing for us since our service hasn't ever really been optimized specifically for grocery orders. So with this experience that we developed, a user could basically order up to 25 items from a curated list within the Favor app. And there were also some really special considerations that we had to make here. And we wanted to make sure that we set our customer expectations appropriately because grocery orders are slightly different than other types of favors. So some of the considerations that we had to think about were things like limited availability of items in the grocery store. Grocery favors would typically take longer than other favors. It could be up to 2 hours. And also runners can only handle a certain amount of shopping within that time. So we did decide to set item limits, hence the 25 item limit that you see here. And here's an example of something that we did for runners. So we basically implemented a shopping list feature to help runners with those grocery orders. We had something similar to this in the Runner app previously, where runners would need to verify items that they picked up before delivery, but they never really had access to a true shopping list. And this was extremely helpful for our runners who ended up running the new grocery favors. So with that, I'll kick it back over to Rachel to talk more about Black Lives Matter.
So I mentioned earlier, we recognized our responsibility. Also that this time was only different because of what we're living in the access that people have to just looking at the TV and looking at their phones. And so we realized that the momentum that was happening was something that we needed to tap into and that we needed to find a way to support. And so we did that, offering our platform to restaurants, knowing that we could amplify their restaurants, their offerings, and try to get our consumers to really support the Black community during that time. We came up with the We Stand Together initiative that was forward facing, and it included both external and internal efforts. And it represented not only our statement of where we stood as an organization, but also our commitment to doing more than just speaking. we wanted it to be clear that we intended to listen, we intended to learn, and we intended to act as well. So one of the things under this initiative was the We Stand Together Fund. And so we provided an opportunity for our consumers to contribute to a fund and really stand with us and donate to organizations that we knew were going to support this movement. And so through that fund, we were able to raise $157,624 with the help of our consumers. And in addition to what we raised in app, we also donated $100,000 of our own funds. And so we came to just over $250,000 that we were able to contribute. And these are the different organizations that we chose. And we were really strategic about who we picked. We wanted to pick, organizations that had national presence, but we also wanted to pick organizations that really supported our local Texas community and in different areas. We wanted to make sure that we thought about, children, men, women, LGBTQ plus community, different areas of profession, art, etc. And so we are really confident in the organizations we picked. I do want to call out, Dream Corps is on here twice. The first donation that we made was to Dream Corps' Cut 50 program for criminal justice reform. The second donation is Dream Corps Tech, and we became the inaugural organization for a scholarship fund to assist with finding different individuals that are interested in entering the tech industry and trying to diversify that pipeline. And then to speak kind of to the internal things that we did, one of the things that we did was create a learning lab series where we invited individuals from our communities to come in and speak on different topics, from racism and privilege to amplifying voices of Black women and LGBTQ plus members, et cetera. So this really was received really well from our team members, and it really was an opportunity for us to listen and to learn and to go ahead and take some things into action in our own personal lives as well.
Sorry, I just had to unmute myself. You heard from Rachel and Coop some of the ways that we started to get started, and also put some frameworks in place that were going to give us the resources we needed to move forward really quickly. And kind of the second thing that we did, in the overall scheme of things, was think about the constraints that we were working with, and I'll talk you through some of those. But first, I just want to talk about this quote from a designer, Micah Bowers, that I think perfectly sums up the two different ways that you can look at constraints. So if you view them unfavorably, constraints are a form of deprivation. They're unavailable options and mandates that exclude better alternatives. The connotation of that is wholly negative. Constraints stifle creativity. And that's not really our view. Our view is kind of the second view of constraints, which is that constraints are ingenuity enhancers. Because resources aren't inexhaustible and design criteria must be met, constraints force a more methodical analysis of people and their problems. They push designers to be strategic about the processes they use and the energies they expend. And that's really going into this, how we were thinking about the constraints that we were given. So a couple of the big constraints that we were working with, and some of the things that we were kind of facing down, was we had these populations that were in need, but we had seniors who weren't really comfortable with mobile devices, or didn't even have them, didn't have the kind of app understanding that we really specialize and are used to at Favor. And then they were working in a lot of cases with landlines, no cell phones, in some of the more remote areas of Texas. And then we were simultaneously dealing with this kind of changing COVID landscape, where we were constantly reevaluating the availability of resources. So we had to kind of meet these seniors where they were. And so what that meant for us is we created a hotline, essentially, called the Senior Support Line. And we staffed it with volunteers from Favor and HEB. So basically, a bunch of people heard this call across these two organizations, and we had, engineers on phones, we had people from the product team on phones across both organizations, and we also had people from HEB stores helping support. So just a ton of people fielding phone calls. So because we needed people to be available to assist these users. And so that created a couple of challenges for our product team and constraints that we were working with, which is we now have this whole group of people who had maybe never taken a phone call before for customer service. So, and this is something that HEB and Favor both pride themselves on, is like excellent customer service. So the product team saw this as a challenge and kind of rose to the occasion by creating a platform that we call Order Assist, where we were able to walk people through giving exceptional customer service and walking them through these different scenarios that were really based on these seniors that these people were serving. So it was a highly curated tool. And so that was like kind of where we started, was making it easier for these volunteers who didn't have that training to support these users over the phone and basically create grocery orders for these seniors, which then our runners, our independent contractors, would go and shop these orders and deliver them directly to these seniors. So this ended up being kind of hugely successful, and we had so much positive feedback from seniors across the community that we then wanted to take that a step further and ask, how do we enable seniors who are comfortable with technology to order for themselves, and how do we unlock that? We did a bunch of research and sort of discovered that the reason why it was kind of a problem right now were the restrictions we had with landlines. The fact that we are mostly a mobile platform. I mean, we do have a website, but the website we learned seniors weren't completely comfortable with because it wasn't a linear approach necessarily. So we did a bunch of studies with Texas seniors through like our online research platform, and we learned that what seniors really wanted was a dead simple linear approach. And so that's what we ended up creating. And we'll talk about go into a little more depth on this later in some of the design considerations here. But we also, on top of the senior program, ended up creating an easy ordering and delivery website, which was just a custom website, almost wizard-like in its approach, that walked seniors through this world kind of step by step, using the mental models that they were already familiar with, which we'll discuss in a little bit more depth. But then this was really the brainchild of one of our designers on our team, Ryan Gray, who kind of said, what if we did this? And it ended up being a really great experience and allowed many seniors to stop having to call and wait on hold, but place orders for themselves. So by May of this year, we had served 125,000 seniors across Texas through these two sort of different platforms. And I'll kick it back to Cooper, who's going to talk to you a little bit about the way we reuse design patterns when we could.
Yeah, so a key philosophy we really tried to stick to during these COVID projects was to work within existing design patterns as much as possible so that we could really speed up our development process. I was kind of saying this before, but we really needed to move at a lightning fast pace. Everything was happening super fast. And so in most cases, we chose to design and build on top of existing systems and technology that we already had in place. That being said, there were a few times where we needed to break outside of some of our existing design patterns. And we made sure to recognize when that was going to be the case. We weren't so rigid with all of this that we were willing to sacrifice better user experiences for the sake of consistency. So a few examples of how we used our existing patterns and also broke from them. The first example here is that we actually already had an in-app giving screen that we had implemented for some past events. And that was really nice because we were able to leverage that to create a way for people to contribute to causes for COVID and also for senior citizens and local businesses. The second thing here is we actually have categories for food cuisines in our app, so people can, quickly browse and see different categories for things. And we were able to use those categories to surface both Black-owned businesses and local businesses, and really help support those businesses within our communities. And then lastly, like I said before, there were some cases where we had to kind of break outside of our patterns. We did break outside of our existing patterns for the easy ordering interface that Meg just showed you a little bit ago. And that was specifically because, we were developing that for senior citizens, and we really needed to kind of do some special things for them that were a little bit different than things that we did in other places. And it ended up being a lot more accessible for that group of people. So I'll just go through a couple of specific examples here. So what you're seeing here is the in-app giving screen that I just mentioned a second ago. And as I was saying, we actually implemented this screen a couple of years ago when Hurricane Harvey hit Texas, and we implemented it so that people could give money to contribute to the Hurricane Harvey stuff. And then when COVID happened, we were able to repurpose that screen specifically for allowing people to give money towards helping senior citizens place orders and get groceries, and also support our local businesses and Black-owned businesses. And then we also spun up a website, just a standalone website where people could go online and also give online. And this example is showing the categories that I mentioned before. So we were able to use our existing category structure to create a place specifically for what we called local favorites and also Black-owned businesses. And it was really important for us to support these businesses. A lot of businesses were struggling because of COVID and the lockdowns. And so this was a really nice way for us to surface these businesses in our app.
And then, what Cooper had brought up, an example of kind of the way that we break patterns as needed is, the easy order site that I was showing you earlier. So this was really kind of a bespoke experience for seniors. We did a wizard-like interface where step by step it was leading seniors through the process of ordering groceries. And early on in the process, we did some studies where we explored with Texas seniors how they think about ordering groceries. And many talked about that list that they would create and take to the store, like that paper list. So we actually created an interface that's a little bit different than what the rest of our consumers were experiencing, and more akin to that kind of list experience where they could type out a list, and then we set expectations about what would happen after that, that somebody would go and shop for them, that somebody would contact them if substitutions needed to be made and stuff like that. We also switched our kind of standard black to the most accessible black color we could, and made the font size on all of these pages much larger, along with guidelines that are out there for senior citizen audiences, just trying to make the website as friendly as possible. And something that we also wanted to talk about today is, when you're in that state of creative flow, it's easy to forget that you need the essentials like rest and time to turn your brain off. And so we were in a mode where, a lot of us were working kind of 60, 80-hour weeks. And it's really easy to kind of throw yourself into that and do that when you are laser focused on these people that you're serving. But it's not sustainable. So we did want to call out that it's important that you make time in these moments to relax and turn your brain off and take time away. Like, there were moments when I was deliberately telling members of my team, I need you to take a couple days off. And I call this out because I think in this moment that we're in right now, it's more vital than ever to remember this. When you're trying to show up for the people around you, you can tend to sort of put yourself aside. And it's really, I think, harder to come back from complete burnout than it is to just take strategic time as these things were happening. You know, a friend of mine used to say, like, you can't pour from an empty cup. And I think that that's true in these situations where you're working so hard for other people. Like, make sure you take that time so that you can continue to be, you know, in it creatively. And then I'm going to kick it back to Rachel to just sort of talk through where we're kind of going from here.
Yeah. So kind of rounding this out, using what you've learned to enhance core offerings. So obviously, you know, Meg and Cooper and Rachel have talked about all of the things that we learned about customers in these times of crisis, all these things we learned about runners and our communities in these times of crisis. And some of these learnings have generated enduring product changes and enduring programmatic changes that Rachel will talk about. And so in terms of product, you know, through all the problems that we solved, when we kind of came out of this, what we realized is we've launched a new business line and we had used technology to reinstate our ability to deliver alcohol in what is arguably a more convenient way for both customers and runners. And so the examples are, you know, knowing that we needed this quick trip HEB delivery service. We had always kind of had the ability for customers to create custom grocery orders if they wanted to, but formalizing that and building out a more intuitive and optimized grocery experience out of necessity was crucial for the time. But it is now kind of a fledgling business line and fledgling product within Favor, where customers are just using it to get quick trip groceries delivered from HEB in under an hour. So that has been great. And we've been continuing to use the learnings that we've gotten from just observing grocery customers to figure out how to enhance that experience kind of post-COVID spike and beyond. And, you know, the need to deliver. So here's kind of, you know, some of those learnings. If we look at express delivery, you know, one thing that we learned is like shopping preferences and customer sensitivity around substitutions is a big issue that exists for grocery deliveries in a way that it doesn't necessarily exist for restaurant prepared food. So on the right, you can see where we're building out a way to give customers the ability to express their substitution preferences and communicate that to runners. That's all learning that came out of urgently doing this product that will be baked into a business line for us going forward. And if you go to the next slide, helping runners shop more efficiently. Another thing that we learned, we saw this kind of earlier when Coop was walking through this, but we implemented sort of a rudimentary shopping list feature to help runners with the unique challenge of dealing with long shopping lists that are part of a grocery order, but aren't part of an order where you're just going and getting McDonald's for a customer. But we encountered other problems, like customers want to really understand if an item has been substituted, if it wasn't available, and have sort of a record of that. And so we've been thinking through how we want to better enable the runner to communicate with the customer around item level changes that happened while the grocery order was being fulfilled. Again, learnings about this specific business line that we never would have learned had we not gone through this crisis. And then finally, contactless alcohol. We faced, obviously we wanted to go to doorstep deliveries anyway. There are health hazards with right now with delivering alcohol and physically carding somebody and forcing a customer and a runner to interact in that close of quarters. But we wanted to be able to deliver alcohol to turn that experience back on, because alcohol delivery is such a huge part of our business. And so we developed a virtual ID verification flow on the consumer side, where the customer takes a selfie and also takes a photo of their license that's transmitted securely so that the runner can compare those, and the runner can virtually ID check the customer and safely and legally deliver the alcohol. Again, that's something that sort of came out of this crisis time, but the learnings that we got around how a flow like that might be implemented to just make favors in general more efficient and more seamless for customers and runners, regardless of the existence of a pandemic, was kind of a new flow that we created out of necessity that we never would have thought about, I think, if we hadn't been trying to solve a very specific kind of problem. And so I'm going to pass it over to Rachel, who will talk about some of the enduring programs that have come out of these crises and ways that they will go on.
So we kind of talked a little bit about, we had to think about our internal efforts as well as our external efforts. And something that we often say is our runners are the heart of our business. And so as we were taking time to listen to, our team members internally and learn and really make sure that we were considering their thoughts and their feelings during this time, we thought that it was important for us to also consider our runners and understand that the things that they might see and face in their communities, even while they're running, these are things that we want to hear so that we can better support them and we can make sure that our product better supports them, et cetera. So we came up with the Runners of Color Council, and we were able to select different runners from our runner base that really had a heart to speak up for and on behalf of the runner community. And through this, we've been able to really research some of the things that they've presented to us and work to try to implement some new strategies and things for them. Go to the next slide. And then we just, really recognize the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion in our organization and our commitment to it. Prior to COVID, we always had diversity and inclusion. And for me, it was something that I was doing kind of like a side desk job in addition to another role that I was in prior. And we realized that this really wasn't a side desk thing, that it needed to be something that, someone was committed to full time. So even just in the creation of my position, that was something that, we as an organization saw as of value, something that needed to happen. But we also started to think about, we had diversity and inclusion and we didn't have equity as a part of our statement. And equity is clearly something that, is something we have to think about. And it's something that we had to consider not just for our team members, but for the community. How can we support a community that is based and built on equity as well? And then it presented a lot of different ideas. Diversity isn't just about race. It's not just about ethnicity, but it brings into question things but like sexual preference and age and disability and, so many things. And so we wanted to make sure that we created an inclusive environment and that we are creating programs similar to the learning labs that you saw earlier. That's something that is ongoing. And we've had several learning labs in a lot of different subjects and topics. And so we're just committed to continuing to grow our process, our protocols, our programs, and our support for the community. In addition, the fund that we did, the We Stand Together Fund, we saw that our consumers really did want to contribute to something. And so that's something that we're focusing on continuing in a lot of different areas as well.
So, what do we think that you can take away from this talk today? So kind of going back over everything that we've talked about today, and we know we threw a ton of information at you. I mean, there was a lot that was done, and we're happy to kind of dive into any one thing in more detail if you'd like, if you have additional questions. But I think the first thing we'd say is, know what the people you serve might need and start to anticipate what how those needs could change. And then after that, throw yourself in, know what you're working with, use those constraints to help you think outside the box. In these sort of moments present the ability to do that in a way that you don't always have the freedom to. So, and then, decide where you're putting your effort. When you're moving fast, think about the patterns you can reuse to serve these communities. And don't be afraid to say, what, none of our patterns serve this community right now, so we're going to create a new one. And really importantly in all of this is like, moving fast is great, but that pace isn't sustainable. So it's going to lead to less creative work over time if you don't give yourself those strategic breaks. So make that time to recharge. And then I think the last thing is, use what you've learned to enhance your core offerings and be more prepared for the next crisis. who are you leaving out of your core experiences, and how do you make your experiences more tailored for these groups? I mean, we've learned so much about the way that seniors work through our apps and websites right now, and we're using those to come back and, you know, pull back in and enhance our core website now. So do you have the frameworks in place to listen and to keep learning? I mean, those things I think are huge. So so that's just kind of like a light framework that you can sort of take away from this. And we'd love to answer any questions that anybody has. If you want to drop them in the chat, we can talk about any of these things in more detail. Cool. So let me read a couple of these. So I love that Favor took initiative to do all this work instead of sitting around and waiting until being asked. I'm curious to know what the response has been like from our Texan communities to all the donation and product work from both the Black Lives Matter and COVID pandemics. Rachel Burnside, would you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. I would say, you know, we've been overwhelmingly supported. Anytime you make a stance or you make a statement on something that's so sensitive, there's always going to be, you know, opposing points of view and some people that might not agree, but we were very clear on where we stood as an organization. And so we stood in that. So I think with anything, anytime, you know, you make a statement or you release, you know, something again that has such sensitive attachment and feeling to it, of course, there's going to be people that have things to say, but I would say overall, we were really supported in the initiative. And you can see that just through the funds that we were able to raise.
Cool. Rachel, I'm going to actually have you take the second question too about supporting designers. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing on my team, but we're also, we've done a lot in terms of our hiring process. And I think Rachel can speak to that a little bit better than I can.
Yes, we have completely revised our recruiting and hiring process. And so we, again, have been considering equity, diversity, and inclusion in all things. And so even the pools of talent that we're searching and looking to, we have definitely diversified that reach, as well as our statements on our websites. And, you know, anything that we feel like will attract diverse talent is something that we're definitely supporting. We definitely have collaborations with different organizations. So I kind of mentioned Dreamcore Tech. They actually find different individuals for different positions in tech. So that could be inclusive of design as well. And so we're not only supporting trying to find individuals for Favor, but for any tech company. We want to be able to make a difference in the pipeline for tech overall. And so that's something that we are excited about investing in. And I think the other thing is just donating and donating time. So a great example would be the Battle of the Brains, which is an organization that, again, supports diversifying the pipeline into tech and tech jobs. And they work with HBCUs and students that are about to graduate, and they have like a pitch competition that they do. We actually volunteered for that. We sent some coaches there to assist with the pitch competition. And then we also had recruiters and networking representatives there as well to try to talk with talent. So we're finding new ways. It's definitely an ongoing process. It's, you know, Rome wasn't built in one day, and we recognize that. HBCUs, I saw someone send me a DM individually. It's historically Black colleges and universities.
And I think to piggyback on that, you know, how we're supporting the design team in general right now, it's really hard to be, I talked about this a little bit, but it's hard to be in a creative space when your brain is elsewhere. And I think that that has been the truth of where we've been at for the last, you know, let's say 8 months or so. So we've really committed also to making time for self-care. We think recharging and being really focused on whether everyone on our team feels supported and okay is really important. So trying to make that front and center, I think, has been really important for us as well. So next question, with so many rapid changes day to day, how did y'all prioritize what work to tackle first? Rachel Losh, I'll let you field this one.
Yeah. That's a great question, and it was hard because every day that we got up, there was a new challenge, there was a new idea somebody had, and and so really we kind of had to change our processes. Favor has a pretty organized product team where we have 8 squads. Each of those squads works toward, has a product manager, a designer, a team of engineers, and they work towards like core KPIs and goals that ladder up to the goals of the business. But very quickly, what we realized is that working towards those core KPIs for like our main product was not the biggest priority for the business right now. And we kind of had to dismantle them. And we just had to move fast and create the right collections of people to solve the right challenges. And so what we ended up doing is we spun up a Trello board where the whole company could see what we were prioritizing. Things that product managers or members of the product team or members of the business were hearing over the course of the day could be submitted to that Trello board. And then we had a meeting, like product leadership and engineering leadership had a quick stand up each morning to go through the latest that we were hearing. And so we really were prioritizing and adjusting day to day, and then making a plan for how we were going to go tackle it and marshal the resources. In terms of how those priorities actually got decided, it often was in terms of kind of, what you might usually think, like severity of the problem and scope of the problem. And so when I think back about how we sequenced these different initiatives, the very first thing we did was doorstep delivery. And we did that in like a weekend. At the end of that week that I'm sure everybody remembers, where I think that everybody in the country really realized that COVID was real and companies were really starting to work from home. And it was like the week that the NBA paused, the week that there were a couple of events that week that I think really highlighted the severity of the pandemic, and where quickly companies started working from home and people became uncomfortable with like person-to-person interaction. And we realized like the first thing we have to do is protect customers and runners, because they're out there right now, interacting, handing things over to each other, and we have to protect them. And so Cooper actually was the design lead on this, and we quickly came up using our existing design patterns with a way to implement doorstep deliveries. And it just kind of went from there. Like the next problem we really faced was across the state of Texas, HEB was being pressured to open for senior shopping hours early in the morning, pressured kind of by the local governments in different towns. But what the CDC's guidelines was that seniors should be staying home and not going out to like specific crowded shopping hours where they could get exposed. And so we thought, what can we do to protect seniors so that they stay at home, but so that we are flexibly serving them during those hours and doing everything we can for them without drawing them into grocery stores. And that was where we were like, okay, we need to do grocery delivery. And as soon as we started researching that demographic, we realized a lot of seniors don't have mobile phones. A lot of seniors don't know how to use our website. And that was what sort of led us down the path of the hotline, and then the tool that volunteers use to staff the hotline, and then the website that allowed seniors to order more easily. So it really started with like, we prioritized based on like big severe problems like runner and customer safety and feedback we were hearing there, and senior grocery shopping safety that sort of was coming in from across the state. And so that's just kind of like a taste of like those initial problems that we decided to solve, but that's kind of how those problems came in real time, and the process that we set up to figure out what we needed to learn more about those problems to create the right solutions.
So Mackenzie asked, what was something that surprised you in regards to feedback from runners from the Runners Council? Rachel, I'll let you take that one.
Yeah, so I think candidly, I'll say, being a Black woman, I can't honestly say that it surprised me. Feedback surprised me because it's really a matter of me thinking about my lived in experiences and things that I've seen in my family and in the community. And so hearing these things, I won't say it's surprising, it's always disheartening. But without giving too much information, because there is confidentiality as it relates to those conversations, I'll say that, racism and discrimination knows no bounds. These are things that they feel and face every day. And whether they're running or they're not running, you know, there's things that things are said to them, they see things. And so, you know, it was eye-opening just to hear that from a runner perspective, and to think of ways that we can make sure that they feel protected and safe. And, you know, it's as small as when you think of a runner going to an affluent neighborhood and people asking, why are you here? Like, how do we better prepare our runners by maybe having stickers on cars, you know, just different things so that they feel like they're not going to be targeted when they're doing their job.
Okay, and it looks like last question here, and I think all of us would have a slightly different answer for this, but sounds like y'all did a great job anticipating needs to create innovative ideas quickly. What are you excited about in Favor's future? What's next? So this is a really good question. I think that all of us on this call are really excited about. I think the work that we've done in the past 8 or so months is the most meaningful work that I've done in my life as a designer. And I'm really excited about the ways that we're going to continue learning and continue doing better. I think that we've really realized that we have this platform where we can really serve our communities. And so continuing to stretch beyond what we're doing now and do better for groups that we haven't thought of quite as much as we needed to in the early stages of our, you know, being a startup, I think is what I'm most excited about moving forward for Favor. But I think there's a lot of exciting things on the horizon as well. We did have one more question posted. I want to try and get to that as well. Were there any hiccups or things missed, lessons learned as part of the process in serving customers and runners? I love this question because the answer is so many. I don't want anyone to walk away from this and be like, see, you know, Favor did everything right the first time. A lot of what we were doing, and you know, I know one of our product operations managers on this call as well, but a lot of that his job during kind of these 8 months were saying, hey, we missed this, and then us kind of like as quickly as possible going back and picking up the pieces and making our products better. It was really like a truly agile development process, and in that way it was like really exciting and freeing to be able to be like, we're going to release this thing, we're going to learn rapidly, and then we're going to make changes to it immediately. But there were all sorts of things that we missed along the way, usability things, hiccups that made life harder, and the things that we set in place, like in terms of specifically the senior support program, where we had all of our volunteers in a channel, and we were listening to them, like we were just pouring over that channel daily. So that combined with the feedback, the constant feedback from those volunteers who were talking to seniors, combined with the tests that we were doing on the side with like our senior population, really helped us kind of catch things as they were coming in, and make sure that we were taking all of these things into consideration. Well, cool, guys, I think we are at time. We're really excited that we got to share some of these things with you today. We're really happy that you guys made time to talk with us about all of this. And if you have any other questions, you know, please feel free to email us or, you know, find us on LinkedIn or whatever, and we'd be happy to answer them. And we're just really thrilled to be able to kind of share these learnings with you guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This was wonderful. It was great to hear everything. We do have a survey in the chat if y'all want to give feedback. But otherwise, please check out the other events today. And thank you so much to the Favor team for presenting. Bye.